David Hume makes a distinction between relations of ideas and matters of fact. The former are a priori truths, known by reason alone, discoverable by the mere operation of thought without dependence on what is anywhere existent in the universe. The latter are a posteriori sensory impressions of empirical particulars. The contrary of every matter of fact, Hume states, is still possible, because it can never imply a contradiction, and is conceived by the mind with the same faculty and distinctness as if ever so comfortable to reality. Furthermore, Hume states, our ideas are often abstract, unwieldy, unclear, and at worst, meaningless. All ideas, Hume says, especially abstract ones, are naturally faint and obscure. The mind has but a slender hold of them. They are apt to be confounded with other resembling ideas, and when we've often employed any term, though without a distinct meaning, we are apt to imagine it has a determinate idea annexed to it. All these ideas are ultimately extrapolations from sense impressions, which are their origin, and therefore cannot obtain the clarity and palpability of those impressions. As Hume states, these faculties of thought, namely recollection and anticipation, may mimic or copy the perceptions of the senses, but they never can entirely reach the force and vivacity of the original sentiment. The utmost we say of them, even when they operate with greatest vigor, is that they represent their object in so lively a manner that we could almost say we feel or see it. But except the mind be disordered by disease or madness, they never can arrive at such a pitch of vivacity as to render these perceptions altogether undistinguishable. All the colors of poetry, however splendid, can never paint natural objects in such a manner as to make the most description be taken for a real landscape. The most lively thought is still inferior to the dullest perception. All they differ is in degrees of force and vivacity. Therefore, experience yields articulated, discrete sensory impressions, which are remembered and related as ideas. Joyce's Finnegans Wake mirrors Hume's description of ideas. A flurry of unwieldy ideas that intermix in the waking brain of history, fight for dominance, and hence truth, in the subterranean underbelly of the wake. Stretching unfathomable swaths of time and place, Finnegans Wake shatters the whole of history into a nuclear fissure of multiple histories, each of which consists of beliefs and fictions spun as fact. For, as Hume shows, many, if not most, of our ideas we have are founded upon experience, but are nevertheless distinct from experience, and furthermore, cannot be derived a priori from experience as we would like to think. Just as Hume, Joyce turns established truths into dynamic webs of contingently established beliefs about a world always changing. What we take to be truth is therefore rather really a collection of beliefs about truth. Joyce understands these beliefs as forming a sort of trap, that is, the trap of dogmatism. In fact, always have I believe. Greedo! Our credos, this passage shows, quickly make us greedy to agglomerate more beliefs, which we always have, not around the base of experience, but the lattice of abstracted and hence dangerous ideas. To productively discuss truth, therefore, as philosophers do and must, one must expose the tactics of experience. Joyce's work at large is indeed an ode to experience. Hence the oft-quoted ending of A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Welcome, O life! I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. Now, while attention is more often placed on the latter part of this quote, what is the nature of the Irish race and how has Joyce constructed it, it's pertinent for our purposes that Joyce acknowledges a palpability and reality of experience. This is the place where facts are found, and notably can be understood as facts without necessarily reducing to an ideal and movable truth. Experience, after all, is dynamic, multifarious, and, as Joyce shows in The Wake, multisensory, hence this wallowing olfact, that is an olfactory fact, plastic, and imaginative. As Hume would concur, every moment of sensory impression is, from the moment of its apprehension, waning in force. It must be continually reinforced and resurrected through the use of recall in memory. These memories will be, as Hume states, far weaker than the moment of impression that they recall, such that even the strongest memory is inferior in force to the weakest sensory impression. This may seem like a rebuttal if taken as a framework through which to experience Finnegans Wake. For how can Joyce's unquestionably fabulated world yield such vivid, surreal images if the whole work is ultimately a concatenation of ideas? Being literature, no matter the skill of the author or the imagination of the reader, one can only fail to aspire to the force of even the faintest of real experiences. But this entirely misplaces the value of literary experience. For as The Wake as a whole works to acknowledge, literature's value is not in replicating and thereby aspiring to the reality of experiences. It couldn't hope to do so, since no matter how painful the literary description of Buckley shooting the Russian general, for example, it can hardly even be compared to the pain felt by the Russian general were he real. The literary experience, therefore, is not intending to replicate an originary experience in the world. This is why it's more and more acknowledged in Wake scholarship that the book does not take place in the sense of corresponding to and describing a discrete, real-world event. In the same way, there is no dreamer either, not in the sense of a real subject of the ideas of the Wake by which we can obtain the true referent of the ideas. Literature, a collection of ideas expressed in words, is not itself experience in the same way stubbing one's toe is. The ideas, represented as words on the page, are extrapolations, inductions, and imaginings founded upon concrete experiences, but not themselves reducible to those experiences. As such, Joyce advances a Humean conception of ideas wherein, because they are distinct from the world they describe, they can take on a life of their own in the empirical imagination. This imagination takes the raw, uncategorized data of experience and uses various procedures to grasp, analyze, sort, and interpret that data. Joyce advances the value of this act of empirical imagination by valorizing the ability of the imagination to play with ideas. In so doing, one robs ideas of their sacred, eternal status and returns them to the dynamic realm of experience from whence they came. In so doing, we encounter the reality of literature as a distinct act of imagination that retains the palpability of experience while submitting it to the act of fission, fragmentation, and play. Now, in addition to this central thesis, it's worth pointing out some corollaries that Joyce extrapolates and expounds upon in The Wake. Firstly, facts are made, hence his neologism, factification. That is the act of making or creating facts. Secondly, following from this, facts change over time and from person to person and place to place. Hence, may be matter of fact now, but was fodder of Magd then. This phrase enacts the act of historic metamorphosis and also interlinguistic metamorphosis that characterizes not only all systems of belief, but also the very facts upon which they are based. Thirdly, facts have autonomy, yielding their own concrete results in experience. Hence, let a few artifacts fend in their own favor. While the world of experience does not speak transparently, as Derrida shows us, supposedly telling us what it ought to mean, for the world in fact knows no such thing of oughts, it simply is, it does nevertheless affect us in concrete ways, motivating our acts of reasoning, recollection, and imagination. Fourthly and finally, the distinction between fact and fiction is therefore far from clear. Hence the title of this lecture, as a mere matter of ficfect. Fiction and fact are intermingled in a stuttering, sputtering portmanteau which contains within it the suggestive German ficken, for fuck or screw. Thus, this portmanteau is at once a stutter between fact and fiction, and an ejaculatory sputter at the end of a sexually charged acrobatics. This suggestiveness is a key aspect of Joyce's theory of facts, for since all experience is by nature subjective, it's thereby also partial, in the dual sense of fragmentary or incomplete, and also biased. Since facts have a certain autonomy that leads us in certain ways, sexuality is a fitting metaphor for its intense sensations and alluring seduction of all parties involved, pulling them to a desired end. Hence the key question of the Wake. Who in his heart doubts either that the facts of feminine clothiering are there all the time, or that the feminine fiction, stranger than the facts, is there also at the same time, only a little to the rear? Moving to the rear and exposing the shy rump of systems of belief, Joyce desires to derobe the tactics of dogma and ideology that entrench beliefs as truth and thereby stultify the human experience. That being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat interesting in thinking about these ideas. You can check out any of my other lectures I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classic literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month if you'd like to gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which I do once a month and can tailor to your needs. Also, you can donate via Super Thanks if you just want to donate one time, because it helps me purchase all the books necessary to bring y'all content, but no pressure. That being said, that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in another one.